different week because it's some procedures that are done either midstream of a modeling process or towards the end of a modeling process, or if you're working with scan data. We're looking at what do we do at a certain point to get the model ready for the next process, or whenever we need better topology or something like that. So we're going to be looking at finishing process. So at the end of tonight, when you're getting ready for that submission, your model should be considered done. You're not going to go, oh, well, I'll keep shaping them this week. No, they're fine as hair. They should be, we're going to call them done. Finding a nice finish point at the secondaries, nice high-end secondary shapes. Don't worry about tertiaries or anything like that. We want those good secondary, high-end secondary forms. Because this week we're going to look at the processes like resurfacing, UVs, normal maps, modeling hair, right? Just give you more shaping experience and how to break down a hairstyle. We're going to model an ear in Maya. Everyone will model a human ear in Maya, kind of thing. Just keep that Maya modeling going, keep it in, keep those juices pumping, and that's what this week will be. I think that it's other than the hair, and resurfacing can be pretty easy if you go about it properly, if you pre-think and have good reference to follow for resurfacing. Resurfacing goes pretty smoothly. The hair, I would say, would be the worst, not the worst, but the hardest asset to create. Hair takes a little bit of time, and you really have to show that you've learned how to break down shapes throughout this month. How did you go from a block out to a t-shirt with wrinkles and seams? The same thing with hair. How do we look at it and break it down, decide how to break it into pieces and parts, more manageable, smaller, more manageable regions, and then start detailing it, right? So that's what we're going to be. I'd say that's your biggest, most time-consuming process for the week. But let's take a look. Questions? Nobody any questions? Points of discussion? Anatomy of the ear, the assignments, how to break down a hairstyle for modeling, techniques for creating hair for a character, rules and ideas for good topology. We touched base on those a little bit last week. Resurfacing procedures for character modeling, UVs, do's and don'ts. Right? Just more about going through the motions on that. Normal maps, do's and don'ts, going through the motions of that. Very reminiscent of what you've already done in MCR. Probably did some stuff, definitely some UVs and shaders and lighting. And you'll get more of it in BSD. Okay. Your two big integratives, the leg study and the hair breakdown. We're going to finish up the anatomy studies with the leg. Right? We did the arm last week. And then we're going to do a hair breakdown, which is similar to the prop breakdown, kind of looking at it, thinking about the main shapes and parts. Get yourself some plans for the week. I would read through all the assignments, get a good idea of what needs to be done, and plan out your week. Right? And then use your resources, stay focused. Right? Remember, I see a lot of people go, oh, I'm still working on I'm still the sculpt, I'm going to sculpt. I'm like, no, if you don't get this done, that's a main core assignment for the week. The sculpture part is, other than the hair, is done. So focus on what needs to be focused on. Be observant, always observant. Watching what tools do, how they work, so you can maybe use them in a way that they weren't intended to be used, but works for a pipeline or get some job done. Okay. Here again, at crochet, leg study. Right? Remember, don't spend more than the allotted time on the integrated assignments when those come up. Here's an example of the hair study. We don't really specify what kind of imagery to have for the hair study, but this is a great image. And this is, I can't remember, I think it was out of one of those, you go to the hair salons and they have the hairstyle books. The more you can break it down, the better. It's just going to work out. But really what we're doing here is, you can see in the first image, we're looking at the layers, and we're looking at how we can break down the collection or chunks of hair. Because your hair, even though it's individual strands, with hair systems, we don't shoot for those individual strands. We usually have a follicle, and that follicle has several hairs coming out of it, right? So going 100% with all the strands, it's very taxing on a machine and your time. So what we're looking for is trying to understand how it collects. Where are the groupings of the hair? And that's how we would start to create our shapes. So here we're breaking down into parts and pieces, And then over here, we're showing the direction, the flow of the hair. How is it growing? You know, how does it flow from the scalp? This is important because when you start laying in not only your shape, but you start using brush strokes to create the details of the hair, you're going to be following that direction. If you don't, the hair's not going to look natural. It's not going to feel like it's growing or, again, a natural hairstyle. So, you know, nice little exercise to get into. We will be modeling an ear, right? I'll tell you this right now, when you model the ear, what a lot of people do is they follow the video and then they stop. And I don't know if we're just not listening to what is said, but both videos, there's two videos. One from 2009, that's one that I made. It's an ear modeling style that I grew up with. And yeah, 2009, who cares? The tutorial still works well. There is one difference. The 3 key does not work on a flat plane. It only works when you extrude. And the split polygon tool is now the multi-cut. So those are the two main differences. But in both videos, it's talking about modeling it, and then at the end, it talks about shaping it, right? So what happens is people model an ear. This one here is getting there, but what they'll, you know, in the video that James did, he stops and the ear is flat. So all the geometry is there and the major anatomy structures of the ear are there. But then he starts talking about you have to continue shaping to make it look more like an ear, right? You've got the structure, build it. If you were to follow that video and stop right where he stops and you don't shape beyond that, you probably, if it looks just like the one that he delivers, you're probably going to end up in a B somewhere. Because the finishing touch is what brings it into the A range, is making it look like an actual ear. But there's a lot of fun going on here with the ear. The ear is at an angle. We've got the anti-helix breaking out the furthest from the helix, right? So we capture that sound. Have some fun with it and actually shape it. Because if you were to finish the ear and leave it at the end of the video, and you think that's what an ear looks like, oh, I'm a little concerned on what our eyes were telling our brains, right? So take it beyond, right? The video stops. You need to go beyond that video and give it some shape. The ear is about, I want to say 5% out of the week, so it's a very easy. When you follow the video, you finish it up with some shaping. It's one of the easier assets to complete. Resurfacing, this is my favorite. I love topology. I grew up with topology. We're going to be resurfacing the heads of our assets. So both characters, we're going to pull the heads from them. We're going to bring them into a Miocene, and we're going to resurface them. We're going to create usable topology, more production-friendly topology. Resurfacing is used all the time. I forgot to bring a cable, but I'll make sure I bring it in the next class where I can show you. I have these two little things here. We've got a Mike Wazowski and a little chili crab from an old sea grab. But you can take these and scan them with a phone and end up with an asset with textures and kind of okay, right? It gives you at least a building block. That's photogrammetry. That is what you're seeing a lot, scan data. Well, that scan data is not usable topology. It's got a lot of triangles, just nasty topology. Sometimes you get holes in the object. Resurfacing is where we would build that usable structure. So I'll remember, if somebody wants to email me to remind me, that'd be great too, but you know, if not, I'll remember because I got my cable right there. Now, resurfacing, I guess the issue with resurfacing is people don't know where it fits within a pipeline. It fits anytime you need better topology to get the job done. So in sculpture realms, you know, there's a lot of times where, and I can, let's get that in this here. Bring up ZBrush. I don't know if I've got the Slimer one, or we can look at the other. We'll look at something. Let's see. I'll look at Maul. Check him out. And talk about when this whole thing needs to happen. Okay, so here is Maul from the Wildcats. I know you're all very familiar with that. He is the Wildcats version of the Hulk. So when I was working on him trying to establish his volume and everything, I was using Dynamesh. Right? Dynamesh only got me so far. When I wanted to get in on the model and start really pushing his creases, Dynamesh didn't work for me anymore. It did if I flooded it with bajillions and bajillions, which is not really a number, but if we gave it a lot of topology, I could work with it, but I needed better topology that fit the shape. So at this point, I needed to go in here and create more usable topology. Right, so you can see this here is kind of following now more this shape, where what's wrong with Dynamesh? Why was Dynamesh struggling to give me these nice arced shapes and creases and wrinkles?
Because it's all triangles.
Not triangles close though. Think of it. What's the next one up? Triangles and then, yeah, it wasn't. It's all quads. It's a grid, right? So everything is going against the grain. So you say, well, what is against the grain? I'll show you, right? So here we have a not so nicely parameterized quad, right? A rectangle. And if I have it here, but I need to put a wrinkle or a crease through it, I've got to try and bend it in an unnatural way, right? It doesn't want to bend that way. It's not built that way. We know that edges allow the surface to break and change. So to really get a crease the way I need it, hopefully they don't need these, I need a crease along the bend point so I can actually bend it. This is more effective. It's more pipeline friendly. It's going to deform better. It's just going to respond better. Sometimes I don't know 100% how I need my surface to bend. So this is why we sculpt. We sculpt, and then when we start seeing that, hey, Dynamesh is giving us a problem, we get rid of Dynamesh. We say, okay, we don't need Dynamesh anymore. So at this point, what I did was I kicked the model out. I did a very simple resurface on it and generated my standard topology. And then I was able to get more of the creasing. But I'll tell you right now, if I push this any further, I'm probably going to need to adjust more topology in the face anyway, because I'm going to start getting into some, finer shapes that this topology is starting to show its weakness, right? We're not really looping around the nose all that well. I don't really have a specific loop to follow some of these shapes. So I'm probably going to go in there and make some alterations to it and then work with it from there. Another case was sure if this is the one or not, but we'll take a look. If it's not, I'll just search for it. Oh, that's the crazy eyeball. Okay, so this guy, you can see the lower res, and I'll be able to zoom in on the lower res. So if you look here, if you look at the eye, you can see the faceting showing the topology. You can see the custom loop going around the nose. Well, he started with Z-spheres, then got turned into Dynamesh. And once I started getting up there into the nose and into the eye and generating the tear duct, this geometry, the Dynamesh topology, failed me. It was going to take way more than I was wanting to spend with Dynamesh. So once the model was to a certain point, I said, you know what? It's time to generate better, more usable topology. So I kicked it out. And we don't have anything for This is just a grid, right? It's just a big grid of topology being thrown at the model. I went ahead and I kicked it out of there and resurfaced, generating my own topology for the face. Now I have pretty good radial for around the mouth, right? Just more pipeline friendly topology. You'll also notice that once he's been resurfaced, I'm going in, I'm starting to add my asymmetry. So here, very symmetrical. Usually when you're sculpting, you take care of all that symmetrical stuff, unless there's big, giant, obviously just a different appendage sticking out of one side than another side. Then I would take that into consideration as I'm sculpting, because that would influence what kind of topology. But since he's just kind of got a little bit more blobbiness on one side than the other, I don't really need that. I can get away with doing that after we have nice clean topology. And now his UVs are already laid out. His UVs are laid out. He can continue being sculpted, but I can also send the low res off to the riggers. So a lot of times when you're looking at a rig, we're actually just talking with the animation department, and they were like, man, a lot of students are struggling with the idea that a rig has a low res mesh with a high res mesh on it. When they go to render, they render the low res because they don't know where the high res is. Well, why would a rig have a low res and a high res?
That's what's easier for my process lower.
Yeah. So when you're animating, you want to have as real-time playback as you can. So a low res works. But when you go to render, well, that's when you go ahead and say, all right, we're done animating. This is cool. Let's turn on the high res mesh, turn off the low res, so when we render, we get a nice clean-looking animation. Because at that point, it's going to take a long time anyway. So letting it calculate the higher res, we'll just let it do that. Okay? And this is one of the ways we can do that. We can dump this model down. All right, we're at 5 subdivisions. I go down all the way to 1. This can go to the animators. They can animate it up, do what they need to do, and then when it's time for whatever, when it's time for generating normal maps. Let's say that we're going to take this model and we're going to do a low-res version of it with normal maps. Well, now I can take this high-res, since the UVs are already laid out in the low-res, I can output this in different resolutions, right? So there are sometimes a need when you want to go in there and say, you know what, I need better topology, whether it be for sculpture or for pipeline purposes. I need to send it to rigging. The model's there, we've gotten approval. Let's send the low res out, the good topology out. You don't want to send them garbage, right? You don't want to send them a low res diagram mesh or anything. We're going to send them a good resurfaced mesh out. They can start rigging it while I finish up all the details and put in the fine lines and wrinkles. And then because the two geometries came, it's the same geometry, just there's more resolution here than here, we can bring it back together, right? So really, you got to know when do I need better topology. This is also going to tell you when you're going to be able to use things like Z-remesher versus hand topology, okay? You're not allowed to use Z-remesher for this assignment, okay? It doesn't do a good job. I know the patterns that it creates. What usually happens is if I kind of think that Z-remesher is being used, I'll take your model into ZBrush, I'll hit Z-remesher on it, and if any of the junctions line up, I know Z-remesher was used. That means you didn't really, it's like hitting auto mapping on UVs, right? Auto map, boom. You're not really doing anything but hitting a button, but Z-remesher is the same thing. Can Z-remesher be used successfully in production? Yes. When? Yeah, if I'm just going to bring something into Maya and I need something lower. Or what if Z-remesher does an okay job for some things but not others? Right? So in the case in point for this guy, I did not want to Z-remesh his entire body. It's pretty simple. There was enough strong shapes in there to help hold the topology I needed. It did an okay job in the hand. I will say though, laying out the UVs, remember I talked about center lines? It's good to have center lines. This hand does not have a center line. I mean, it is all jacked up. So when I did the UVs, I had a lot of jogging UV seams, right? Which just means that they're not a nice clean line, they're bouncing up and down. And I had to try and figure out how to get this to cut through the center of the hand, so I was kind of moving through that. But it's not really going to be animated. It's going to be a still shot. I need enough topology to pose it. So ZRemesher gave me, I'd say, about 80% of my topology. Now, I've been resurfacing and building for a long time, so for me to get rid of the face topology, rework it, and then pipe it back into the body topology, it was no big deal, right? Because I've done that before. It's a little bit, if it was your first time getting into there, it would be a nightmare. Because you're trying to make sure that as you're building your new topology, it's going to line up with the old topology, make sure we're not changing flow and all that stuff. So his face was hand topologized. The rest of his body was ZRemesher. Okay? I'm telling you this not to say this is how I want you to do it. I'm telling you this to show you that you can work the two together. And at the end of the day, you shouldn't really be able to tell what was used. It should just be good topology. Okay? I will tell you a couple other issues that ZRemesher gave me. It destroyed my center line in certain areas. I had to go in there and fix it. This was one of the fixes here, where it kind of just had a big giant triangle, real nasty piece of topology there. But I had to go in there and I just wasn't happy with it. Wanted to change that. And there was a couple other areas through the middle of the back that I just had to simplify and clean up. Okay? But again, all of this, around the face, to the forehead, and around the cheeks and everything, that was all hand done because I had more control. So, ZRemesher, great. You want a background character real quick? Boom, ZRemesher. Have a good time. It's going to be in the background. No one's really going to care that much. It's something that's smaller. We used it along the way in our pipeline, right? When we Dynamesh and then ZRemesh, just so we didn't have to work with Dynamesh that much anymore on simple objects. It's a real nice way to take care of simple objects. It does a good job. Okay, but anything that's a hero shot, I want to make sure that I'm controlling that. You know, play the control freak card. You know, I need control. You can do that. All right, so what is this process looking? You know, let's work with him. He's a little irregular, but we'll go ahead and take this one. We'll go through that. So we're going to use him, but I'm going to finish going through the PowerPoint, and then we'll jump back in. Does anybody have any questions about ZRemeshing? Or not ZRemeshing, but resurfacing, why you would do it, when you wouldn't? All right. I mean, just know that Dynamesh, I don't think about it. You could probably rig Dynamesh, but I don't know. I mean, you could rig anything. I just don't think it's going to work out all that well with less topology. All right, so let's go ahead and get back into this, because once you get me talking about topology, I will just keep going. I love topology. I think topology is just fun. Right, so you're going to be doing the topology for the heads of your characters. Right, you can see here, this is a decent topology for a human head. It's the one that I've used for most of my standard heads. I've used it for some other non-standard shapes, and it doesn't hold up all that well once you start elongating the snout and you start changing direction and volumes of a standard head. It also doesn't fare too well on older characters once you start getting jowls and custom wrinkles left and right. The face wrinkles differently left and right. If you've got some larger form wrinkles there, this topology would fall short. But for most baseline characters, this is a good topology. Okay, you're more than welcome to source it if you want. We will be laying out UVs. This is an older topology, right? Topology is one of the big things that has changed between, in the past 5 years has been the amount of topology. And I would also say a simplification of edge looping, right? As we can utilize maps more, displacement maps, vector displacements, bump maps, they're stronger, they render better. Now I can get away with less complexity. But for most hero characters, they're going to push the topology a little bit more technical, making sure that we're holding certain forms. And when you want to hold a form, when you want to hold a wrinkle, it is best to have that topology there for that large shape. But you'll see there is a difference here. Basic layouts are the same, but a little bit more geometry in the other one. But we will be doing layouts for the heads as well. The resurface topology, we're going to lay out the UVs for both of those. We're going to generate normal maps for both of those and apply those. The UVs and the normal maps, super quick. That's an easy job. I'll show you how to do that in a matter of minutes. So it makes me real sad when I don't see that done in week 4, because you're just like, it's like 8% of your grade. Let's hold on to that. It's so easy to do. Let's hold on to it. Right, and this is again just to show you that once you hit week 3, the characters are done. You will be adding the hair, but you want to call them finito.
One question about
Yeah.
using the head.
Yes.
Are you using UDIMs for using the head, or?
If you know how to do it and it works, yeah.
I'll learn that one last month and easy for me. I just wonder if you're okay with that.
Yeah, as long as it loads on my machine and works right, and I don't have to do anything, good.
Yeah.
Right, because remember, you're handing it to somebody, you're not there to fix it. So yeah, if it works, good up. All right, so let's go back into the resurfacing. So you're going to have your heavy topology. This guy's sitting at, let's see, what's he at? 3.2 million. Okay, so we're going to talk about decimation, not because it's necessary, but I'm always thinking about efficiencies, work efficiencies, what's going to help other programs. Because for some reason, Maya just doesn't like a lot of topology. It's gotten a lot better, but again, I still want to help it out whenever I can. And when I'm resurfacing, it's doing a lot of work, a lot of computations there, and I want to make sure that I'm helping it out as best as possible. So what we're going to do is I'm going to probably decimate the model, and I'm going to take just the part I need. If your character, their head is attached, you could take the whole body into Maya, but again, I think I like the blinders, right? And for this assignment, we're only doing the head. We only need topology for the head. Very rarely would you just be resurfacing the head. You'd probably be resurfacing the entire body. But for this assignment, we're going to take the head from the body, bring it into Maya, resurface it, UV it, normal map it. Once we have those assets built, we can bring it back and bring it into our final submission scene, no problem, okay? So to do this, I'm going to, let's see. Probably just going to do a hide. So I'm going to take the lasso select tool. And I'm going to go ahead and just keep the parts I need. Now, for this character, resurfacing him in just a state of like a skull, right? Because usually the cutoff line is going to be right here, the base of the skull, under the jaw, and under the chin. That is the section of the head we're going to be doing. He doesn't really have a neck. So I'm going to have to pick a termination line. It'll probably be at the bottom of this, this fold, and then come up through this channel and then across the back of his skull, right? Just kind of resurface that section. Once I have that, I would go in, and let's go geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Let's check its poly count. Still 1.2 million. Good amount of topology. I'm going to go ahead and decimate it. So we're going to go to plugin, plugin, decimation master. We're going to pre-process current. All your defaults work fine. Right, it's going to decimate it to 20%. Right, 20% of the original count. So 1 million polygons will end up roughly around 200,000. This is 1.2, so we'll be a little bit above that. And this is really a ballpark. It can't get rid of geometry, or it's going to try not to get rid of geometry that's going to hurt the shape. It wants to keep as much of the shape as it possibly can with the setting. So we pre-processed it, now we want to go through and decimate. So you pre-process first, and then you decimate, and I'm doing the current. I'm not doing all of it, right? Because there's no point in decimating and all the other parts, right? I'm just doing the current one selected. So let's take a look at the topology. Right? Again, this is decimated topology. You can see it holding geometry for creases, but getting rid of all the other stuff. So where are we at now? We're at there's no way that's 4.0 something. It's already a lot lower. Let's see. And your active points is different than the other one, but 248. So we'll go off a point count. It went down quite a bit. Let's undo. Let's see where we're at before. 1.2. And it's saying 12. But let's take that down. Let's go ahead and do it again. Same shape, a lot less topology, right? So if you don't believe me on the look, here it is. Decimated. There it is, undecimated. Decimated. Looks the same, right? All right, so once we have the head removed from our asset, we're going to go ahead and export it out. OBJ format. Give it a little bit more identifying name. There we go. Now I will tell you another reason I had to resurface his face was the process goes like this: you sculpt, and if you're going to try and use Z-remesher, but you've got higher end shapes in there, you're going to Z-remesh, and then you're going to take your Z-remesh and you're going to shrink wrap it or project it down with a high res. Even when you resurface, you're going to bring that back in, and you want to capture all the shape, right, as much as you can. So you're going to take your high res, your 8 million, 12 million poly structure. You're going to take your 20,000 poly character. You're going to put it over the 8 million, and you're going to project down to it. And then you're going to add a subdivision. You're going to project again, and you're slowly shrink wrapping the good topology to the not so good topology. Okay. So again, it's important that we have these things working. And what didn't work was his tear duct. The Z-remesher, no matter what I did, I tried to correct it. I tried to have it do better topology in the eye. It would not give me topology that would project correctly for the eye. It kept it floating on itself. It would project a couple levels, and once I get a little bit too high res, the geometry would shoot out. So what I had to do was pull an actual loop through the tear duct, restructure it, and then bring it back in and project it really nicely. Right, so just some of the stuff you might run into. So that has been exported. We're ready to bring that into Maya. And Slimer page resurface. So let's go ahead and open up a new scene. And what you're going to do is go File, Import, make sure OBJ is there. And remember, file type specific option, single object. Once that's there, you're good to go. I like to drag and drop. Okay. Put that there. I'm going to go ahead and throw that on a layer so I can do what I need to do. And we're going to lock it down. All right. Quad draw needs a target, right? You need to lock it down so you can actually draw on it and knows where to go. If you start using quad draw and it's just throwing points in space, you have not made your high res live. It's got no target. Scan data, anything, this is how you would go. All right, so we're ready to get going here, right? Not yet. Okay, technically, yes, we've got our asset. We're sitting here. We're ready to start creating usable topology. how do I know what's usable topology? How do I know what's good topology? How do I know that, I'm going to use this tool that's so easy to use, I'm not going to get myself into trouble. So you're going to need some reference. You're going to need topology reference. You're going to need things to follow, guides to follow. Make this an easy process. You're not going to revolutionize the topology world. And people have been doing it for years, right? I've been doing this for 15 years with 3 years of school, so 18, going on 20 years. And I remember when the first face topology, the really good one, came out. Everyone was like, "Wow, look at that!" And you'll see a lot of similarities between that and what we're using today for a standard human face. So get out there and find some good usable topology. And I don't know, does anybody remember me talking about the rules of topology? Hopefully you took notes during lecture or when you rewatched the video and you wrote down the 4 rules of topology that I talked about when I was looking at the props. We were in Maya, and I was talking about what makes good topology versus bad topology. There's 4 of them. Really helps you look into, hey, I'm going to go look at wireframe. Hey, is that good wireframe? Is it bad wireframe? Is it older wireframe? Those things. Anybody remember those? They're real important. They're like, if you want to model and you want to generate good topology, that's those things. So when I said they were really important during the lecture, I was like, these are what I use to tell when topology is good. So talking about we need to bring back testing. I'm telling you, people need to take tests. No, there's so much information because when do you need to come up with those? When do you need to know them, if not for a test, except for when someone asks you? But unless it's on a PowerPoint, I don't see many people breaking stuff down. Okay, we'll go through it again. I usually go through it. It's hard pressed that I mention them once, and then I ask the class, and I don't think I've ever had anybody be able to deliver until the second time I deliver that. Right? And if you're like, I don't have time to study, remember who you're talking to. Remember who you're talking to. The guy that would go home, read his notes, before he went to bed, read my notes, woke up, read my notes, came to class early, read my notes, after class, read my notes again, quizzed people, left and right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And now everything's changed because Maya's gone through so many revisions. But no, you gotta remember, take notes. You don't want to be on the job and have somebody tell you something that's very important and crucial to the success of the asset you're building. You go, oh, I forgot step 9. Let me go ask them. Let me go ask the art director what they said. Let me have them repeat themselves. No, that is a terrible thing. They will be angry. They're going to think that you're not that professional, and it's going to be a big stain on your, how you're looked at an office. You don't want to be the question asker when you're on the job. Okay, taking notes helps out with that. So we'll go in here. We'll take a look. So what I'm looking for is geometry that's going to be capable. I talked about this in the beginning of the lecture. Capable of generating the shapes I need. So I noticed really quickly, Dynamesh didn't allow me to get certain shapes unless I had a ton of geometry. That's not effective, it's not efficient. I need better topology to get better shapes. So does your topology give you the shape you need? When you're resurfacing, your shape's already there, right? But believe it or not, I've seen people make topology that doesn't hold the core shape. So when I hit the 3 key or I look at it, the nose disappears because they just put big giant polygons over the face and it just doesn't hold the shape. That's not what we're shooting for. Maybe for a low-res game, third-person view, we can get away with bad topology like that because we're using mostly normal maps and you just need enough to get a silhouette read from 100 yards out. Okay? Purpose dictates process. We can cut corners there. When we're doing hero pieces, we want to make sure our topology holds the shape. So we got to have topology that gives a shape. The next thing is good, clean topology in general. We're not using n-gons, T-junctions, heavy star junctions, overuse of triangles, n-gon, non-manifold, unmerged verts, lamina faces, any of that stuff. We want to make sure it's clear of our model. Overused junctions, right? That's when we have a bunch of junctions just kind of spiraling around in an area. If you can't tell me why it's there, don't have it because I'm a firm believer geometry has a job. As long as you know what that geometry is supposed to be doing, you can get better shape and better functionality of your topology. Yes?
Triangles complete no-go? or-
With the quad draw, it's kind of hard to make them, but once in a while they're okay. You need to tie off a line.
I have some like that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm not looking at the geometry for the props until week 4. I just want to make sure it's not a mess. Kind of. But yeah, I mean, you can even use an end gun when you know when you're using it and how you're using it, right? End guns are not the devil. They're actually quite usable in certain circumstances. Right? Don't tell anybody I told you that. Yeah, I'm yelling. Right, all right, so we've got good topology, good clean topology, good topology that will equal good shape. Now we're going to look at density and parameterization. Right? I want to make sure that I'm not looking at a model that has a whole bunch of geometry packed in the cheek and then there's 15,000 polys here and 500 up here. That doesn't work, it doesn't smooth well, it won't deform properly, it's just too irregular of density. So we're going to look for densities. Do we have enough density to hold our shape? That goes into rule number 1. And are we blending our densities? Right? So we're not having an abrupt change from 1,000 polygons to 500, but we have more of a gradual change, right? So we can blend our densities. On the other side of that, right, it was density and, what's the other word? I just said it. Density and, nope.
Responsibility.
Nope. Hurts my heart. It really does. I kind of almost want to come in some months and just say, here's the archives. Go to it. And watch those.
Yikes.
You know? Density and paratroopers.
Parallelograms.
No.
Topology. Parameters.
Close. Atomization at the end of that, or parameterization.
Yeah, that one.
Density and parameterization.
Close one is parallel.
You were close, right? So parameterization is the measurement between, right? Remember I held up this piece of paper and I said, this doesn't have the best parameterization because it's a rectangle, right? A uniformly parameterized polygon will be a quad. It will be a square. So when we're looking at topology, we're making topology, we don't want to be perfect. That just takes too much time. But we want to pay attention to our parameterization. As we're building our densities, if we don't have enough density, we tend to have bad parameterization because we have to stretch our polygons, right? They begin to tear, they begin to kite, right? When a polygon no longer looks like a rectangle or a square, it starts to kite. It gets skewed, right? It's bad. Would that be a part of I don't know.
I know what
Yeah, so that would be kiting. Yeah. All right. So you want to look at your spacing as you're evaluating topologies and when you're building topologies. The next thing is going to be edge looping and edge flow. Right? Edge looping and edge flow. So one, are we utilizing edge loops to control topology? Right? So when we edge loop a model, we're going to have an ocular cavity loop. This is a loop that goes usually around the bone structure of the ocular cavity. That will generate 3 to 4 star junctions around it, but it allows us to put nice radial loops around the eye. Okay? We'll have a radial loop around the muzzle. Right? We'll use a laugh line loop that's coming from the nostril down and into the chin. It's a nice laugh line. I'm not saying you will use that one, but I'm talking about loops. There's a cape loop that goes through the pec, or under the breast, through the shoulder, and down the back or across the back. You'll have an abdominal loop, right? Loops. When somebody says edge looping, technically an edge loop is an edge facing another edge end to end, like a train, right? You just have, here's an edge, plugs into another edge, that's an edge loop. It could be 2 edges, it could be 15 edges, but when I'm talking as a modeler, when I say edge looping, I'm talking about how we're using edges to encompass an area, encircle an area, flow our topology through the model, that kind of thing. It's a little bit more technical. So when I look at a model, I don't want to look at a grid of topology, I want to look at edge loops that are used correctly fitting the model. The other part of that is, as I'm generating edge loops, is edge flow, edge quality. The big thing that we notice is when people start working with topology, they're just their edges are all jagged like a heartbeat, right? We don't want jagged like a heartbeat. We want edges that flow with the model, very similar to contour lines. Maybe there's a reason we had you do contour lines. If you do contour lines correctly, you're one step closer to developing wireframes because wireframes fit the contours. They help us make the shapes we need. So we want smooth flowing edges running through our models, not just jagged mess, right? So when you're looking at wireframe, again, you want to make sure they have good edge loop structures in there, and you want to make sure that it's not all jagged and just kind of wonky, unless there's a reason for it. If you can tell me why it's that way, and you can argue that point, and maybe we have something to talk about. But usually we're not pushing for it. Okay? So those 4 things will help you develop better wireframe, and they'll help you find better wireframe to resource, right? To put in there as references, because you don't want to go in here and just start clicking away. I know it, James knows it, Christian knows it, Tim knows it, because we've spent time taking cubes, a polygon cube, and cutting up topology to make a face. I've built hundreds and hundreds of heads out of basic topology. Right? I've resurfaced hundreds and hundreds of heads and bodies. So I have a vocabulary in my brain, a visual vocabulary of topology. If you don't have that, you're going to need to have something there. And people go, am I cheating that way? Well, if you've downloaded a wireframe and shrink wrapped it to your character, yes, you are cheating. But if you're sitting there going, all right, here's my reference. I see that star junction right here. Usually you're going to have a star junction somewhere up in here. Let me put, that is from the center line, that is 1, 2, 3 edges over. Cool, let me go onto my model. 1, 2, 3, okay. And then it goes up 1, 2, 3. Let me build this patch, and then over 2, and then down 2, right? And let me get that patch going. And then from that star junction to the next star junction is 10 edges. 1, 2, 3, and you just count your way through it. That will make your life easier, okay? Once you've done that once or twice and you've built a standard head a couple times or a cartoony head, and you say, oh, that's an ocular loop, that's this loop, that's that loop, I can see that pattern, why it's good, why it's not, then you can go ahead and start having fun with other structures and maybe making up some stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize human wireframe for this guy, because he's got cartoony-like characteristics, but he's generally human in his features. All right, so we've got it set up. We would go online and we would look for wireframe. We've done that, a little bit of that for you already. Inbox, don't need that. We went through and developed a bunch of images for you. Right, you'll see that there are similarities between the good ones. Right, here's one that was bad. A nice exercise if you want to plan wireframe or get a feel for what the wireframe is doing is take it into Photoshop, take your image into Photoshop and draw on it. Right. Try and be observant as to why geometry changes for different head shapes. What rules is this head breaking? Out of the 4 rules of topology, why would I deem this not good topology?
Parameterization.
Close, and yes. Parameterization and density is, one is too low res for what they're trying to do, pushing their geometry too far. And the parameterization, look at that. It's kiting, right? Clue number 1 is we get that kiting happening, it's stretching, it's tearing. That polygon down the chin, it's screaming in pain. It needs something to relax it. It needs more topology around it to help support it, right? To help it out. So yeah, density parameterization. And what else? There's another one in here. Edges are wild. They're a little jagged. It's jagged because the density's not high enough. So we're getting it's not terrible in all places, but there are some places where the change in direction is too abrupt. So now we have some edge flow problems. But there's another one. What shape usually changes from the chin to the masseter and to the mandible? Usually dips in a little bit in here, right? So we get usually the chin, and then we push in a little bit, kind of flattening out that plane, and then we pick up for the mandible. there's no way in hell that geometry is going to allow you to do anything like that, because it's just not done. So now we have geometry equaling shape. There's not enough geometry to get the proper shapes. How are we going to push in the temple region and really support the zygomatic arch when there's no geometry running through the side of the head? We can't. If I were to look at this model and say, hey, you need to push in the temporal region, you're going to go, on geometry there, if I can't. Right? Because if you push this one in, you're now destroying the side of the forehead at the temporal crest. So from the zygomatic and the temporal crest, there's zero geometry to shape. Right? So shape, it doesn't have enough geometry for shape. Okay? We can tear it apart even more. There's a lot of other things in there, the corners of the mouth. I mean, it's starving for more. The edge looping pattern isn't that bad. This one's kind of a tricky one in some cases because it's got radials for eyes. I'm not saying radials always go around eyes. You'll see in the Slimer model that there might be a call for a broken radial. We've got kind of a muzzle loop in here, a nice radial around the lips. That is a good idea. We have a similar topology layout for the upper eyelid and lower eyelid, the upper lip and lower lip. You want to kind of match densities on your upper lid and your lower lid, upper lip and lower lip. You want to keep the densities there. They kind of have a center line for the bottom and top eyelid, the corners of the eyes, corners of the mouth, and center of the mouth, right? Remember I was talking about center lines? You want to, when you're looking at a structure, you want to say, what's the center line? I want to make sure I have an edge running through the center line, center line, center line, right? So it's on its way. It's definitely on its way. It just needs, a little bit more pushing, a little bit more geometry. Now I'm only guessing at what the artist is doing here. They could be halfway through the build. Maybe they have an update somewhere. But from where it is now, this is a Google image search. I might find this and go, that's the topology I want to run with. Now we know why we wouldn't want to, or what we would need to do to make it better. All right, this one here, the density levels change quite a bit, going from the front of the face to the back of the head, but they're doing it in a smart way. Okay, again, my OCD kicks in, and I'd want to make sure it was a little more even, or maybe kill it a little bit more up into the hairline. But overall, clean. Look at the spacing. Look at the edge looping. Right, it's a nice wireframe. This just shows some basic layouts. Here again, pinpointing. Star junctions tell you so much about a topology. They tell you where shape change happens. Right? And on this one, you can see where those are. These are the changing of loops and direction. I love wireframes in general. A lot of people, they get confused. When would I use a diamond junction? When would I use a box junction? Familiar with those terms? Is that for real? Yes? No? Okay. I'm trying to think of I'll just draw them here, okay? Because a lot of people, they hear them differently, right? So a diamond, this is a diamond, right there. Diamond starts one edge, turns it into three. Right? It's one thing to know these patterns. It's another to know how to use them correctly, right? So we're taking one edge, we're splitting it into three, and we're moving down. So this one is great for creasing, for tapering or flaring topology. And how would I know how to use it? Well, if I'm in my adolescent awkwardness of modeling, I'm going to go and see how another good artist used it. And you can see here they're taking one edge in the thin part of the hood, expanding it to three so they have enough for the flared section of the hood. Good reason to use it. They're using a box junction here. Anytime you do an extrusion, you can see another box junction here. This is allowing them to either pull a rivet or push in. They're using box junction here. Box junction, you'll see it usually drawn this way. But realistically, whenever you extrude, you're probably used to seeing something like this. Right? Star junctions in the corners. But a box junction, what makes a box junction interesting is it can be used for all kinds of, if you look at a box junction and you just focus on one corner of it, I can come up, over, and up, and then tie off, creating quads, 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 quads. So I can use a corner and just kind of flip it as I work through a model. I really don't know when you would do something like that unless you had a lot of intricate scroll work or something that you were trying to pull from something. But, you know, that's a box junction. The other types of junctions you run into, a standard, that's the best junction you can get. A T-junction, these are no-nos, be careful with them. You don't have that edge on the other side to support. You gotta put a T-junction, it creates an end-on. Here is a T-junction being used properly, but still very dangerous. Knowing that T-junctions are bad tells me that I have to be careful with that vertice. That vertice is very powerful to the shape around it, so I have to watch out for that. And then of course a star junction, it's just when you have more than 4 points going in. Right? 5-point stars, okay. 6 points, we want to be careful with. 7, 8, 9-point stars on organic surfaces, we don't want. There's no need for anything over a 6. And I would try and tell you there's really anything needed more than a 5-point. Okay. But start looking at wireframes. This is great. I mean, here's a star junction going right in. Look at how they're using it here on the fender as well. It's really nice. Okay. Now, if this is where it gets crazy, I'm going to clear this. What's cool about understanding what smoothing does, if you know that you're building a base res model, right? And I go in here. Sorry, my apple's all kind of crazy. And I know that I'm going to start opening up a crease through the forehead of a character. I can take something like this, and when I subdivide it, it's going to generate. It's going to take that. Let's see, we go to that one. It's going to take this and generate a diamond junction for me, which is pretty cool. So if I know when I'm using it, if I know that I'm going to smooth my mesh, I can just run some edges across the forehead, smooth it. I get diamond junctions a lot cleaner. Let's actually take a look at it because I think it's better to look at that then. But wireframes, use the ones we've got. Fine, like this guy's crazy. I look when I saw this, I was like, no way. That's fun. That's a mess. That breaks all kinds of rules. That's mental. Got a lot of shape change. I'd like to talk to the modelers there and see if that was automated. Did they use something like Gear Mesher, clean some stuff up, or they're just like, whatever, run it, let's see. All right, so what I was talking about with an end gun, I'll bring up just a plain. Okay, so we just have a plane of topology. Just adjusted this before we're going into all this. Okay, so if I'm working on this and I want to make better topology or whatever I'm working on, I'll go ahead and drop in. So let's go ahead and move the ZBrush mode. Made it live. Thanks for telling me, guys.
It's such a tiny
All right, so we got that. It just took a little bit, right? Or if I were going to be building this on my own, right, and putting in the actual topology, killing me right now. Yes. This is the pen I glued together. It seems like it's having some issues with it. Okay, so we have a diamond. So let's say I was creating a wrinkle or a crease in the side of a car. What I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth this mesh, right? Okay, and you can see that the N-gon turned into a real clean junction. Where the other one is an overcomplicated junction. It's a diamond on top of a diamond. Right? It's a little bit funky. In most cases, right, you got to think about this in, switch from learning to production mentality. When is this going to be a problem? Is it really going to be a problem? On hard surface stuff, yes. Something like this is going to be harder to control, and you might get more puckering on your surface or dents, whereas this is a lot cleaner. So sometimes, you can use an N-gon if you know when or how you're using it. Also, what makes a polygon illegal? An N-gon is completely legal when what? This is old school stuff. When the polygon face doesn't have any interior angles. So what does that really mean? It means that when you have a polygon, right, if it's an N-gon or whatever, as soon as you break inward on it, we'll just use good old. If you break inward on the face, this is now an N-gon, or a big M for Marcus, this inward point, that creates a non-legal polygon. If this were sitting out, right, it doesn't matter how much geometry we have going around it, as long as everything is outward, we're good. No convex. Right? So what would make this legal? Well, we can either triangulate it or push this out flat or beyond so it opens up that face. So on hard surface stuff, not bad. We wouldn't want anything like that. All right, so let's get rid of that. Let's bring back. Let's lock it down again and get our quad draw up and running. Now, if your quad draw tool starts to lag on you, starts to chug, one, could be history. Two, maybe you didn't decimate, you got too much geometry. But usually what happens is it starts, every face that you're generating is creating a new connection to the original, the default material. If that happens, there's two main fixes. One is to export the mesh out and the resurface topology, so you get your high res, low res. Export them out, start a new scene, re-import them back into a new fresh scene, connect them again, and start quad drawing. The other way is to go into your new surface, go into the hypergraph, yes, and show input-output connections and delete all the new connections to the shader, right? Because you'll see a whole bunch of these trying to connect back to the shader, so you gotta actually mess with the nodes. All right, so where do I start? I would recommend anywhere that you can make sense of the topology. If you're looking at reference and you go, I really understand this loop, for whatever reason, that makes sense to me, start there. Most characters will have a radial around the mouth and a radial around the eye, so I can start by generating the mouth patch or the eye patch. His mouth patch is a little bit different because his cheeks are coming down and connecting to the radial around the mouth. So that's going to be a little bit of an area that I'm going to have to customize from a standard topology. His eye, though, is pretty regular. So I can start here. Okay? So I'm going to go back into, let's see, let's just do old-fashioned. Look at that. I can pinpoint geometry for certain shapes. Some of these are going to be, they're very dense, so I want to be careful with looking at those. Ooh. So I'm just looking for something that works. Now, beautiful thing is we gave you human topology on FSO, right? We gave you the example images, and we also gave you that head in the example images. Feel free to use that. Let's see what's going on there. Oh, this one looks really nice for a cartoon structure. Not bad. That one's starting to be built up. These are always good ones. I think we give you this one as well. Go ahead and see what's going on there. Whenever you can find this kind of stuff, awesome. I do want to point out, you don't want to close off the eyes or the mouth. You want to keep the mouth open, right? So even if you didn't sculpt mouth cavity, right, which we didn't, you're going to want to leave a slit for the lips, and you're going to want to leave the eyes open. So that one's not bad for bigger cartoon eyelids. I like that. But this is more human. So we'll go with this one. This looks good. Just open that up. Okay. And we'll just put that over here. So we can get a little bit bigger. All right. So a little lower res, but not bad. Nice and clean. So I can see that there's a center line, upper and lower. Roughly, we have center line out. It's a little bit off. I got 3 in the corner, 3 in the corner. But I'm going to utilize this structure as much as I can. At least this loop pattern. I love that they colored it in. It helps make sense of what we're looking at. Now, when I'm first laying down base topology, I'm looking for larger shape changes. You can see his hood is really big, so that's going to hurt. I'm actually just going to go from there to there. Put in my center line, and then I'll go too heavy too fast, but I am going to pay attention to some rules. The rule of 3, every corner should have 3 edges, right? So the corner of the eye is 3, and I'm going to try and match, make my life a little easier. Let's match what I'm doing from the top to the bottom. You'll see I'm ignoring this shape. I'm ignoring that right there. It's not happy. So I'm just looking at the general idea of this wireframe. Okay, and I want to hold down Shift. We'll start dropping in. And it's a little finicky. So you just have to move the camera. Okay. Now, if I start to see that the geometry is not holding the shape, right, that's when I need to start making choices, figuring out is this going to work, is it not going to work. Adjust your form, your clipping planes as needed. So once I get a base structure in there, I can start adding off of need. So I want to hold that corner a little bit more, hold control, drop that in, and I'm going to give the tear duct. This tear duct's pretty pronounced, so I want to make sure that I've got enough geometry for it. But I want to be careful with what I'm doing. I don't want to get in here and start really changing my density levels. If I add more here, it's going to start to need more geometry in other areas. So less is more in the early stages. All right, so we've got a nice loop there. Now we're going to go ahead and kind of bridge across the nose. And again, keeping in line what's going on here. You can see from the loop, they go over the nose. So that's what I'm also looking at the planar structure of the nose, how it comes over and then down. And I'm going to try and match my topology. Okay. All right, choice to make. Big eyebrow. If I really want this to work and be functional, I'm going to need to take topology around it to kind of hold the shape. I don't want to just run straight grid. It's not going to work all that well. So a good edge or edge loop to turn geometry is a box junction. So I can come out of the eyelid here and turn my topology around, right? So I have to see exactly how we want to do that. I think I'm going to need an extra edge. I'll put one up top, I'll put one down bottom. Even. Okay. We'll tuck that up there. There. Now, see my box junctions right there being created. And circling around that structure. Spacing this out. And based on the density that I'm starting to create, I'm going to move some of this around. And yeah, some of these areas are really close together. It's going to be a little bit of a pain. You will have to zoom in. Get that stuff going. Okay, now another concern that starts to happen when people are generating topology, it comes down to where do I take my edges? Right? How do I continue? And basically, what I would tell you to do is start trying to see the path, the trajectory of an edge. Right? So this edge, its direction is this way. Let me see if I can get this to actually. So this edge here naturally flows this way. This edge, I'm not quite sure. Good question. This edge coming up here would naturally go this way. Okay? Let me bring up the tool again. Now I can pick directions. Okay, you're always going to have one that's midline. That midline is usually where your junction is going to have. I would go with what's obvious. This one here is obviously pointing up, so is this one. So when I go and I want to start creating my topology, okay, there's my crossover. There's my junction. And the grease pencil, yes, if you haven't figured it out yet, it's a great tool to help figure out what's going to happen on the surface or there. It's a nice way to kind of figure it out before you go and break stuff. see that junction, box junction, turning that edge. And we'd end up with one up here as well. There's going to be a point. I'm just kind of following that shape. All of this stuff up here, these are not structural. These are more surface. Displacement maps, normal maps will pick up that stuff. So you'll see that, when the shape is big enough, when it's large enough, that's when we have to start thinking about actually putting geometry there for it. Box. How do we play that game? Which way are the edges going? This one's going to go down. This one goes across. That's our junction. Close that off. And now we're going to pull geometry a little bit more. I'm actually going to help out the upper eyelids here a little bit. He's got more shape than most models, so therefore it's going to start a little heavier than in some cases I would like. Turn with that roof off to the side. See, as the edges start to travel, as we start traveling out of the corner here, or around the eye, we start getting larger, more aggressive polygons. I have to make note of that. That's something that I might need to worry about. So by adding in an edge, possibly two, it allows me to refine and relax the topology. I'll put one on the top. I'm going to try and maintain similar resolutions at the bottom, so I'm going to throw one. Cool. Chug on me a little bit. You have substance. Okay, let's go ahead and finish off the eyelid here. Now extending works out pretty good. I don't like it around the entire structure, but if I preset some things up, come in here, extend that with, it might work. A little too much. Some of the tools sound really cool. You can just extend edges. Sometimes there's more trouble than there was. The upper eyelid, I'll just run that one right there. But in some circumstances, extending to fill a gap looks like pretty nice. be careful as far as edge flow, making sure that your geometry is working with the shapes. My topology should start arcing over this area. Okay, and also you can work in patches. So what I mean by that is if you have a big area and you're like, oh man, I got a little too dense too fast, go ahead and put in some big polygons. Right, you can go in there and kind of line this up and fill a big patch really quickly. And we'll just kind of connect. And of course shift, relax the topology a little bit. Okay, finish the structure here. And go ahead and grab extend. This is going to be pretty nice. Again, that's a structural wrinkle there. Make sure I have an edge running there. Have to change direction at some point. Calls that. Think about, are we going to turn this around and do that completely? If you want to do something like that, you could lay in the quad strips. Right, so get that little thing going and carry that up the eye. A little bit more geometry. All the way over. Let that connect. Quad strips are okay. You just, in some cases, I don't need even spacing right away. I'm going to build that in as I go. And I can start seeing plug points, so. Just kind of increasing. I'm going to patch this in pretty aggressively. You'll see that now I'm running into, what do I do? Where do we go? Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Bring that down a little bit. Simplify like we did. And then 1, 2, and we'll see about Okay, so that geometry is very aggressively put in there. I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out a little bit. I'm going to turn on soft select. Make my fall off radius a little smaller. Quite a bit smaller. Now when I hold shift, a larger area of influence. All right, now I have to be careful. Some of the geometry was where it needed to be for a specific reason. So I want to watch out for that. So now let's take a look at what we've got so far. I'm working on it for a little bit, getting that eye. And a lot of your models won't be as complex. Let's give it a second. I'll just do it. Object mode. So what I like to do once in a while is just move the model. That. So now you can also think about, oh, if I'm doing armor plates or something like that, we can make form-fitting stuff right to the surface. We hit 3 key. We look at it. We say, are we holding enough of this shape? I like to hit the 7 key once in a while and look at it and say, do we have the same silhouettes? I'm going to have to move the surface around a little bit. Good. Okay. You go back in, lock it back down, and you continue to work. Now this radial, it's going around the eye. I want to make sure I maintain that, but I'm also going to need to get into some other shapes. And the lips the same way. We'll go ahead and build this in patches, right? You don't have to do it all going from and working way out. If you're like, you know what, that's getting a little too complex, I need to step away from it for a little bit, think about it while I work on something that's a little bit more simplistic. I go on the lip. You get nice broad strokes first. Thinking about center lines. So I just lay in some base geometry over to the inside, and this mouth is open, so. Ooh, look, we got that little tragus in there. Might need a little bit of geometry for that. So I start adding it in, so we'll add in a little bit more. Target there. Now, if I'm going to go into a model and throw in extra geometry for a tighter shape, what I usually do is I'll take out that area, and that way I can just cut in whatever that pattern is going to be. And his lip line all the way from top to bottom should be one continuous edge. Extend. Patch that in a little bit quicker. I would carry that around. So setup artists do like having, if I go to the upper lip and I click on that edge loop, it should go, whatever one I'm using for the lip line should be the same one for the bottom lip line. Same thing for the eyelid. That's why we use the radials. I've got the radial loop here. It should be the same one on the lower. That's how you can also check your loops. So it's something that I'm thinking about as I go through this process. Now, looking at these two sections, does this feel the same density-wise? This area up here compared to here. Siri obviously thought I was asking something. Right? No, it's definitely not. It is a different density level. My goal would be to make these two roughly the same. And as I start to bring geometry up and around the nose, you'd be surprised how quickly that'll happen. Go around the nostril, and more stuff. Ears, characters with big long ears, you're going to do the same kind of thing where you go around the base of the ear horns, same type of pattern. Need a lip holder. Oh no, look at that, it's not going to work. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Throw in my lip line holder. Just take this one around. I said holder, I'm talking about putting an edge in that'll help support. I mean, holding edges, all that stuff. You'll actually end up with another one right there as we see that slightly. More the volume of it. Now it's starting to feel like it belongs a little bit more than it's going on there. At some point, though, the geometry is going to have to change. It's actually a pretty interesting structure. Just for fun. Start bridging between the two sections if I feel the need to. Right, don't be afraid to get rid of an area. Draw it out. Say, you know what, I got to figure that area out. So I might go in and say, let's see, go at. Hey, look, brought up that thing. There might be something in here. All right, that might be nice. Let me zoom around that and see how that geometry looks. Right? So, I haven't seen anybody that's got a character that's, got a structure like this yet. I don't think so. There's the rabbit, the badger character, anything with the elongated face. Look at dog topology for dogs, topology for werewolves, that kind of stuff. There's got to be something that would match. There's got to be a topology out there that you can reference that is good topology. If you have a question on if it's good topology, take a picture of it, send it to me. I'll tell you yay or nay. And we go from there. Right? But This should be something where you sit down and you say, all right, 4 hours, I wanna have this head done. And then the other one will take you probably less, maybe 2 or 3 hours on the next one. Bang that one up. Okay? Totally doable. If you're just kind of making it up as you go, it doesn't go that fast. I find it therapeutic. It's like laying out UVs, and everyone loves UVs.
I really like UVA.
Planar maps, lecture seams, unfold, done. Easy. We'll look at that in the next class, and then we'll go from there. Any questions? Yeah.
What was the shortcuts for loop extension and
Okay. Good questions. Okay, so first thing you've got is the extend, so that is tab. When you're just in space, tab gives you the quad strips. Just click it, you can draw them out. This is a nice way to start a loop. Once you have some geometry there, hold tab, and if you're on an edge, you'll get the extend options. So mine is set to extend loop, so it's going to extend a full edge loop. So once it runs into a star junction or something like that, it won't go beyond that. If you want to change those, right mouse button. There you go. Hold on, something's it's stuck. Okay, so if you right mouse button while in extend, so holding tab, you can switch to border, which is the entire outer border. It doesn't work the way you would think though. You would think that it would almost be like an extrusion scale, spreading out all. It doesn't seem to work that way. Edge and loop are the ones that I'll jump between. Edge does just a single edge, so if you wanted to kind of take an edge loop around an area, it's kind of nice. So I'll jump between those two. Those are my go-tos. Is that a question?
Yes.
Yes.
So we don't do hair this week either?
This week, yes, we will be doing hair. We'll be showing multiple. I mean, you guys should have an understanding of the tools and be able to look at some images and start figuring out a pathway to generating hair, but we're going to do a lecture on some techniques and getting started with hair. Now, the other question was the relax. So shift. Right, so when you do shift by default, it's just gonna, you can relax an edge here and there, but if you want a larger area of influence, hit the B key, adjust your radius to whatever size you need it, and now when you hold shift, it'll take all those points into consideration. Because sometimes you get this big patch and you're trying to smooth it out like on the skull, and you're going back and forth between what its default is. You hit the B key, adjust your radius, and you get much cleaner. And deleting, you know how to delete? Deleting edges or deleting points, deleting faces while in the Quadro. Shift control. Okay. You can delete an edge loop, you can delete an edge face, curve. Control adds in edge loops. Go through it. Yeah, it's a great tool. I mean, I love it when it's not chugging.
Are we also resurfacing the hair?
No. None of the hair should be pulled from the head mesh. Right? All your hair surfaces will be separate from the head mesh, because when you do your resurfacing, you're going to resurface the skull and the face. Right? The entire face and skull. So if you have hair there, it's going to kind of, one, make your life harder, and two, shouldn't model it that way. Good question, because I do get a lot of people that just sculpt the hair out, and then they ask, well, how do they get a bad construction grade for the hair? Like, it's just sculpted out of the head mesh. Right? It's supposed to make a separate piece or separate pieces. Cool. Good. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? There we go. All right. So y'all have a good day. Good luck with the submission tonight. Email me if you need. And